we live in a time where the threat landscape is changing, by the instant, right? Even in the span of this podcast, think of the technical innovations in AI and security and so on and so forth that have changed even in that amount of time.
I tend to be one that believes looking at any type of security posture or any type of detection and response strategy, let's review it on at least a yearly basis. I'd like to see quarterly. So when you talk about tomorrow, today, yesterday, and forward, it needs to be something that happens quite frequently. I think it's something that's so important, though, because we're in a reactive world.
Let's be very practical. Either you're strategic or you're tactical. Typically, if your organization and you're protecting an organization, you're very tactical. You're looking at the events, the alerts. You're looking at what's going on in front of you. Do I understand? How can I respond? How can I keep things running? So you're in the weeds. Look at the big picture. Recognize what's in front of you today. Do a little projection of where you think it might be going. But identify your gaps and identify where you're succeeding, identify where you might be falling down, and then create a long-term plan and then revisit that plan every quarter to see if it needs adjustments.
Talk to me a little bit about what a detection and response implementation looks like.
You have to be ready and willing to respond at all hours. As a service, you don't know when your customers are going to get attacked. So that's 24/7. You have to identify detection and do a response. But the key factor that I see to some success is the more visibility that you get, the better chance you have of identifying a threat, because threat actors are going to go after your blind spots. So which that means that you have to deploy everywhere. You have to deploy an agent down to every single endpoint that you can, not just some endpoints, not the most critical endpoints, not the ones they don't mind if you deploy an agent to. And then wherever you get visibility, if threats are coming in through identity and attacking identity, then you need to go after the identity solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to the Security Strategist podcast, your blueprint for evolving cybersecurity strategy. My name is Chris Steffen, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. I'm the Research Director and Vice President of Information Security at Enterprise Management Associates, an analyst firm that looks at how companies manage their IT infrastructure from the data center out to the user and into the cloud, and I focus primarily on information security. Today, I'm joined by Jim Waggoner and Joe Ferla, head nerd at N-able. We're going to have a great podcast today. We already have had a great conversation, and I look really forward to talking more with these two gentlemen today. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most talk about topics in cybersecurity, and that is detection and response. We're going to explore the transition from endpoint detection and response, that is EDR, to MDR, managed detection and response, and whatever other blah, blah, blah DRs that we might talk about, XDR, elemental PDR, you name it. We're going to talk about those too. So again, Joe, Jim, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on. Can you tell me a little bit about yourselves? Start with Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim. I am VP Executive here at N-able at Lumen, in product management, responsible for strategy. So I've been in cybersecurity a real long time. So a little bit over 2 decades, where it is my mission to protect our customers, all of my customers, and to the threats and adversaries that want to take them down.
Very cool. Joe, talk to me. Tell me about the coolest title in the universe.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, I'm Joe Ferla. I'm one of the head nerds here at N-able. And what head nerd really means is we are a group of 7 at N-able that are here for the market, right? We are, I guess you could, for lack of a better term, say sponsored by N-able. But what our primary goal is we're here to be subject matter experts and provide education opportunities, provide assistance where we can to those in the MSP or small to mid-market channels. My primary focus is security and one of our products at Lumen, but you also find other head nerds like Lewis Pope, who's security and compliance, or Eric Harless, who's our backup and recovery nerd. We've got Stephanie Hammond, sales and marketing. So we just span the gambit of what is the IT space.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. I'm really happy to hear that you guys do that. We need more of that. We need more evangelism, especially for the small to mid-market. They want it, they need it, they love it. So again, thanks for doing that. And thanks for you guys both appearing on the podcast today. I know that one of the things that people, when I talk to executives in general, especially about EDR, XDR, MDR, all their detection and response tools, is that most of the time they do the D part well, right? The detection part, again, I don't know that we've conquered the D, but at the same time, I think that we have a better understanding of the components to that. But then it comes at the expense of doing the R very, very poorly, or at least definitely not from the level that they promised. Talk to me a little bit about what's causing that gap from expectation to reality.
I think one of the gaps that I tend to see with this is who's making the decision. A lot of the times in the small to mid market, I'll see decision makers that aren't necessarily security experts. They're not necessarily technical experts. And they're the ones that are driving the purchasing. They're the ones that are driving the sales process as they're buying into this tool. And while that's worked in the past, it's something that's been able to be done. Diving into an MDR, an XDR, or EDR tool, or whatever DR acronym you want, is incredibly complex. So these folks that have had this built-in sales process in their organization of, here is our decision maker, they're going to go through the purchasing, they're going to walk through what the tools can do, this, that, and the other, and then we'll leave it to the technical folk to implement. We're now to a point where those technical folks need to be in that decision-making process, and then sometimes it's very difficult to bring them in. I don't want my security expert away from their desk for an 8-hour sales process, even if it's spread over a couple weeks, right? So these folks that are making the decision to purchase a product are trusting the product does what they want, and they don't really know what they need in the real world, right? If I'm looking at an XDR, I'm going to be told it could do a lot of things, but what I may need is actually an MDR tool. I don't have anybody in my organization who can run something like an XDR, right? And those are distinct things that I think when it comes to response and expectations of what a tool can do, we're putting our technical staff on a little bit of a back foot, but we're also probably not buying the right fit product for the organization.
That is an awesome response. I want to take that the next step further and talk about maturity too, because I think that to what you said translates exactly the way that I think about it too, but I think it also translates into maturity, and that I think that your pointy hair bosses that are out there, your executive types, they have a overinflated sense as to how mature their organization is from their technical capabilities. And that could be security, that could be whatever. But if you're being honest with yourself as a nerd, you know what you can do and you know what you can't. And so when you're taking and having that conversation, the only person that's going to be honest with yourself is you. And so getting them involved as part of that decision-making process, I think, is critical, because they are the ones that have the most realistic view as not only to their needs, but their capabilities.
Definitely. And especially, I think when it comes to something like an XDR, if you are a highly mature organization with your own security analyst and SOC team, right? Yeah, that could be for you. But like you mentioned, in the small to mid market, a lot of us just aren't that mature, right? And we need to be looking at something like a true MDR that provides that 24/7 SOC behind it, right? But then comes into, when we talk about delivering response, it's what is that response actually, right? Again, another shortcoming, I think, of even some technical folk here, or some technical folks in the market, are we have unrealistic expectations of what an MDR can do, right? I have people at Enable coming to me as a head nerd thinking that we can touch backups as a response, and that's just like no ifs, ands, or buts. Are we ever going to do that? So expectations there may be unrealistic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at response. So my background is I came in from the product company. We had a services company that would do digital forensics, incident response out on customers. And I created the software for them. But we moved into the XDR world. And really what we thought is just like you said, we thought about the X. We migrated from the E, the endpoint. We thought about X, which is all vectors and the telemetry we could get, and then the detections and identifying the threats. But then when it came to the R, to us, it was like a little R. Oh, the threats were just blocked automatically, as opposed to here when we look at managed detection and a response. Response is, what can we do at line speed automatically to stop, block, contain a threat, or whatever else that we can do? Can we disable accounts? Can we identify? Can we stop ransomware from hitting other systems or stop lateral movement? And eventually, although Joe can't initiate a backup, can we identify if a backup is necessary and eventually automatically, and again at line speed, faster than threats can respond, do a restoration or of a system that may have been compromised. And I think that I see as the response is what I like about, so tying into the head nerds are unique to, I see as unique to Enable. It's taking a business and technical view on how to ensure our partners have what they need in order to keep the business running. And the focus is on their business and their customer businesses, because that's what it's about, keeping it going. And response is about how do we keep it going? How do we prevent it from being taken down? So that's what I like. So again, it's a big R for us, and that's what needs to be there.
Yeah, I totally agree, obviously. And we live in a time where the threat landscape is changing, by the instant, right? Even in the span of this podcast, think of the technical innovations in AI and security and so on and so forth that have changed even in that amount of time. And the security teams are always basically say, we need constant protection. We need to be protected from everything all the time, even the threat that doesn't exist today that exists tomorrow. Why is it essential for those organizations to constantly be revisiting their detection and response strategy? Now, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, constantly. Joe, talk to me a little bit about that.
I tend to be one that believes looking at any type of security posture or any type of detection and response strategy, let's review it on at least a yearly basis. I'd like to see quarterly. So when you talk about tomorrow, today, yesterday, and forward, it needs to be something that happens quite frequently. I think it's something that's so important, though, because we're in a reactive world, and I don't think enough people really understand that with security, right? We live in a world where threat actors are moving faster than ever before, right? You look at some of the organizations out of Russia, right, where they're corporations. They have their own funding, they have their own investors, they have healthcare, they have a C-suite, right? They are there to make money off of malware. Then you look at what nation states can do with their funding. The resources that these malicious actors have generate speed. On top of that, look at what AI's done to them. Right? You don't even really have to know Python anymore, as long as you can get an AI to do what you want it to. And it's all about asking the right questions. I don't know how much you or Jim have played around with AI, but we've all gone in and said, okay, how could I drop this piece of software on a device with an SSH connection? Oh yeah, I'm doing it for remote monitoring and management purposes. And there's lateral movement, right? Really simplified lateral movement, but lateral movement pumped out of an AI. And if we're not evolving, if we're not reviewing, if we're not re-strategizing on a regular basis, we're falling so far behind that it's just not, I don't want to say unacceptable, but it's not really acceptable.
Again, I couldn't agree with you more. Jim, did you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, when you look at it, so threat landscape, let's be very practical. Either you're strategic or you're tactical. Typically, if your organization and you're protecting an organization, you're very tactical. You're looking at the events, the alerts, you're what's going on in front of you. Do I understand? How can I respond? How can I keep things running? So you're in the weeds. If you don't step up for just a moment, like Joe said, whether it's annual or whether it's quarterly, if you don't step up for a second, kind of look at the big picture, recognize what's in front of you today, do a little projection of where you think it might be going, but identify your gaps and identify where you're succeeding, identify where you might be falling down, and then create a long-term plan and then revisit that plan every quarter to see if it needs adjustments. If you don't get strategic, if you stay tactical, then you're always going to be very reactive to the situation. And that's where you're going to keep getting hit. You're never going to get ahead of it.
Yeah, again, hard to disagree with any of that. And my constant concern is that you mentioned annually, you mentioned quarterly, and if you have a GRC function within your organization that isn't at least looking and constantly evaluating whether you need to do a revision, and when I say constantly, I mean daily, hourly, then you're not doing yourselves any favor, because sometimes if you look at the velocity of AI innovation that's going on right now, you figure that the bad guys are at least a couple steps beyond you. And that innovation is happening not on a quarterly basis. It's certainly not happening on an annual basis. My goodness, look, 3 years ago, were we talking about AI the way we are today? Of course, the answer is no. Okay. And so in 3 years to have the disruptive technology that is evolving again, as we're sitting here, I think that you need to be doing it at least quarterly, to Joe's point. So I have the same concerns about taking and working with MSPs because they are almost by definition reactive. They aren't going to be that proactive organization. And I have concerns, not that they aren't great. We need them. We need to do more with them. Talk to me a little bit more about the MSP. I know that they deliver that monitoring and so on and so forth, and they're actually really good at detection. But how do you help them take and do more of the response capabilities? Joe, give me some thoughts there.
In the MSP space, what we're seeing a lot of, at least nowadays, from my perspective, is MSPs are IT support providers that tend to be run by nerds. So kind of tying back into what you said earlier, where nerds tend to be pretty good at knowing what I can and cannot do in the security world, knowing where my gaps are, what do I need filled, that kind of deal. MSPs tend to have a pretty good idea of where they sit. At least the good MSPs have a good idea where they sit. And they've started to realize that they need something like the enable MDR, right? Where you now have automated response to certain detections or certain actions happening within your environment, be it on an endpoint, be it in the cloud, be it on a user, be it on a network device, right? And then that 24/7 SOC behind them as well. Because AI going through logs, AI going through, whatever data sources information that you can pump into it is fine and dandy, but you need that human behind it. You need, once you start going away from automation, a human presence. So a lot of MSPs I'm seeing are moving towards this full stack of EDR, XDR, MDR. And they're doing what they can, and that might be tier 1, tier 2. But at some point, they're starting to figure out, I need to outsource because we just don't have the expertise. We can't hire in the expertise. We can't afford it. And we definitely can't afford 24/7. And I'm assuming a lot of the small and mid-market are in the same fashion. A single security analyst is going to cost you, what, 75 to 125K, if not more. Now figure we need that 24/7. It's not feasible for folks of our size, businesses of our size. So MSPs have started to take that outsourcing into consideration, and the good ones are doing that.
I totally agree. I would argue too, coming back to the maturity conversation, if you can acknowledge that you don't have those capabilities, that an MSP might be able to help you with those capabilities, I'm here to tell you, you're actually more mature than a lot of your peers, because a lot of your peers aren't willing to have the come to Jesus meeting to understand that they aren't there. They're in that state of denial. The denial is just not a river, right? So it is important to realize that phoning a friend is an absolutely critical and important part of any of these situations.
And one of the things too, I'd also be willing to bet those organizations that have that maturity to recognize where their gaps are the ones that are revisiting detection and response strategies, and they have plans in place. One of the running jokes I say in my webinars, or I say when I'm doing education, is we've all done fire drills before. We are full-grown adults and we have to practice walking out of the door in a single file line. Detection and response is infinitely more complex than that. We need to test, we need to revisit, we need to re-strategize on a continual basis. And again, tying back in, I'm betting those mature organizations are the ones that are actually doing that. They are testing, they are running some type of simulation to see how they fit.
Yeah, if you think about it, it comes down to maturity. If you have an MSP who is security mature, and let's branch it as security mature, they can do it themselves. And they're like, you know what? We're just looking for a tool. We need a platform. We understand that, we have a lot of different software or security software that's out there. We need something that will bring in all the security events, but we're going to offer the security operations center services to our customers. Then on the flip side, there's the ones who are like, you know what? I don't have that expertise. They're mature enough to acknowledge it. I don't have that expertise. I need help. I need someone to come in and they can offer it to my customers that I trust, that has a good brand behind it, that I know is going to be there 24/7 up around the world. And then there's ones that are in between. They're like, you know what? Maybe they always stay where they're going to leverage off of managed services that are being outsourced to another trusted company, or they learn along the way, you know what? We have an opportunity here where we can grow our business. We see where we can do the services and start to take it over. Maybe we become the more mature one, or whether there's a co-managed in between. So there's that whole journey that we really see happening within our customers. And some may even go, you know, we've been doing managed services. We just want to offload it to somebody.
Absolutely. Jim, talk to me a little bit about what a detection and response implementation looks like. I mean, what does a proper one look like in your opinion?
Yeah, so we'll actually do this together. I think Joe can add a lot more as well. So I'm seeing some things that are so real life. I'm watching some that are performing really well, and I'm watching some that are not when you take over a managed service. So ultimately, what you want to be able to offer is you need to recognize that, like I think was it this call we mentioned that you have to be ready and willing to respond at all hours. As a service, you don't know when your customers are going to get attacked. So you have to be always on. So that's 24/7. That's around the clock. That's at any time. That's on weekends. And then you have to respond automatically if something goes wrong. You have to identify detection and do a response. But the key factor that I see to some success is when it comes to the environment that you're protecting, investigators, hunters will all agree, those that are responsible for, is the more visibility that you get, the better chance you have of identifying a threat, because threat actors are going to go after your blind spots. So which that means that you have to deploy everywhere. You have to deploy an agent down to every single endpoint that you can, not just some endpoints, not the most critical endpoints, not the ones they don't mind if you deploy an agent to. And then wherever you get visibility, if threats are coming in through identity and attacking identity, then you need to go after the identity solutions. You need to go after Azure. You need to go after wherever your assets, your people, your resources are at, and pull that information in so that you can detect that threat activity, and then combine those all together and do an automated response on it. So those are the key elements I'm seeing, because I literally have customers today who are like, you know what? I'm only going to deploy to the newest operating systems, maybe half my fleet. Maybe I only integrate
security by obscurity, right? I mean, let's think and put our head in the sand and hope that they don't see this little system over here in the corner.
If an alert doesn't exist,
you know how well that works, right?
If I don't see an alert, it doesn't exist. So it's like, do I really need to pay attention? Right. So Joe, any other comments?
I think one of the things that you kind of hit the nail on the head there is like have information coming in from every environment or every system or every tool set you can. And I think it's nice to remember that this isn't just like Microsoft. This isn't just your endpoints. It isn't just your network devices. This can also be things like your SSO provider, right? This can be things like your MFA provider. This is things like that piece of software, that you have as a SaaS model. Monitor logins. Are there any extraneous password resets or anything like that you can get? The more avenues of information gathering you have, the better you are. Because I think at that point too, what we're fighting here isn't just the ransomware. It isn't just the malicious actor. It's also we're fighting phishing that's more mature than ever. And to truly fight that, you need as many information sources as you can.
It's no longer the Prince of Nigeria emails that we're fighting anymore, right? I mean, this is
I wish.
I mean, seriously, this gray in this beard did not come from, some tie-dye for Christmas. This is dealing with Prince of Nigeria, but we were able to deal with that, right? It ain't that easy anymore, right? And so when I look ahead, one of the questions that I have, and we gotta kind of start wrapping things up a little bit, but talk to me about how you think that I get less gray in my beard, but how do you see the D's and the R's actually evolving in the future to cause us less headaches, to give us less stress, and to give us better results?
The evolution that I see is, again, going back to our maturity, is being mature enough to say, I can't.
It's so hard to do that. And I completely agree with you. I wish I could give people an easy button saying, if you press this button, somebody will help you. It will be okay. And getting people to press that button is a Herculean task.
And you talked about like over the past 3 years, right? I'll kind of shed some light onto this. I ran an MSP as a single man up until 4 years ago. I was the 325 device shop. I ran it while I was working at Enable. And this kind of puts into perspective, I was able to do this as a second job, right? It was my second income stream. Nowadays, I could not come anywhere near close to doing this. I would be remiss in trying to do something like that nowadays. It's impossible, right? I look back at the piece of ransomware that hit me when I was an MSP. I look at how I could have prevented that in 2020, and I go, yeah, okay, we could have done better. There was a couple of mistakes. I look at what I'm seeing in reports now in 2025, 2024, and looking at things like the Chromium browser exploit, where they were dropping pieces of PowerShell coming in every line of a JPEG. I mean, come on, right? The I can't statement is the biggest step you're going to take, and find someone like Adlumin. I'd like it to be us at Enable, right? Because I think we have the best team, but we need somebody like that backing you up, right? The evolution is going to be, I need an expert, and I can't have an expert on staff because they're too expensive. I need that SOC.
Jim, any thoughts?
A different take, and it's also a fundamental theme that we have, I think, in this podcast, and that is move from being reactive, and truly the future is about being proactive. Is get out of the day-to-day, go beyond just creating a security resilience, cyber resilience plan, but think about what are the steps you can take to become more proactive. What can you do to think to your environment or your customers' environments to ensure that the threats never even get a stop? Whether that's technology-wise, they'll call it vulnerability management, patching. Even today, I will see, password management and identity detection response, but I will see where environments are being attacked because someone has not patched a system. So the vulnerabilities are there and the threat actors, adversaries are taking advantage of them. I'll see passwords that are used, credentials are being used for not only their own environment, but every single partner that they manage or every single customer they manage. They don't want to go through the pain of changing credentials or credential rotation or uniqueness or even MFA. They're being compromised very easily. But think about what you can do from being very proactive in the nature of security to mitigate those threats. So attack surface management and reduction.
I think that's great. One last question before we wrap up. I wanted to take and complete this podcast today. If you had a very quick 30, 60-second takeaway message for the executive table, CISOs, CTOs, CIOs, IT nerds, whatever, what would that be?
I think if I had 60 seconds, I'd probably say don't stop learning, right? There are 1,000,001 organizations out there, some of which are very good, like CompTIA, InfoSec, and all of these certification places. Don't downplay a certification, even if it's a simple one, right? If you're going for the CompTIA basic security ones, that's still you learning. That way, you have an easier time making the decision of I can or I can't, right? So make sure you're continuing that education for both yourself and your employees and learning where you can say, I need help. On top of that, I think I'll shadow a little bit of what Jim's been saying. Please do the easy stuff well. Patch once a week. Change your passwords every 90 days. I'd like you to do it more than that, but let's start with 90 days, right? Make sure you have everything multi-factor authentication, right? In honesty, I'd like passwords to be changed every time you log in. Like, let's go.
Back here in reality land.
Right. Yeah, let's do the easy things and do the easy things well. We hear about them on the news. We hear about them from the newspaper or from online, and we all say the same thing. Oh, it's not going to be me. If you say, oh, it's not going to be me, means you're probably not doing it well enough. Do the easy things well.
Totally agree. Jim, any last thoughts?
Yeah, we'll keep it in 30 seconds or less. AI is changing the world, has changed the world. We're using it. We see it every day in productivity. we, being in the space that we're in, see it every day, examples of it where adversaries and threat actors are taking advantage of it, where they have AI-driven polymorphic changes, or they're doing ways of, scanning networks to identify breaches. But you need to take a look on how you can leverage AI to better protect your environment. Look at the companies like us when we're taking and using AI for detection models, for response, where we, creating detections, doing investigations, just where it's going to go and how we're going to use it to offset the people shortage that we've been talking about for a very long time. So that's where I would focus right now, is get ahead of it, see where you can actually exploit the capabilities in AI to better protect yourself.
That's fantastic. Obviously, we could sit here and talk for the next 6 hours. I mean, I feel like we kind of rushed it, but at the same time, this was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful conversation. Joe and Jim, thanks for coming on to the podcast today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope that you took as much away from this podcast as I did. If you'd like more information about what we talked about, head on over to n-able.com, n-able.com. Lots of information there. We'll be back next week with another episode of our podcast series. Until then, make certain you subscribe to this podcast on all your major platforms and follow a conversation on our socials, EM360 Tech, on X and Twitter and LinkedIn and whatever they call it. And for more daily content, head on over to em360tech.com. Thanks for listening, and another great podcast.